The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty street of Willow Creek as Penelope Evans hurried toward the general store, her heart racing with fear rather than from exertion. It was 1875, and like most frontier towns in Colorado Territory, Willow Creek had its share of troubles, but none quite like Vernon Holt, the man who'd been terrorizing her for weeks with unwanted advances that had recently turned to threats. "Morning, Miss Evans," called Mrs. Thornton from her millinery shop. "You're out early today." Penelope managed a smile that didn't reach her eyes. At 22, she'd come west 2 years ago after her parents passing to teach at the newly established schoolhouse. She'd found purpose here, respect even, until Holt had set his sights on her. "Just need to collect some supplies before school," she replied, clutching her shawl tighter despite the warm June morning. Inside the general store, Mr. Finch was arranging jars of candy on the counter. His weathered face brightened at the sight of her. "Miss Evans, I've set aside those primers you ordered. Came in on yesterday's stage." "Thank you, Mr. Finch. That's very kind." As she collected her items, the store door swung open with enough force to rattle the glass bottles on the shelves. Vernon Holt stood in the doorway, his 6-foot frame blocking the morning light. At 35, he owned the largest cattle spread north of town and carried himself with the entitlement of a man who believed money could buy anything, including people. "Well now, if it ain't the prettiest schoolmarm west of the Mississippi," Holt drawled, removing his hat with exaggerated courtesy. "Been looking for you, darlin'." Penelope stiffened. "Mr. Holt, I've made my feelings quite clear. I'm not interested in your company." "That's so." His smile didn't reach his cold eyes. "Funny, 'cause everyone says you've been mighty friendly, smiling at me in church, wearing those pretty dresses when you know I'll be in town." Mr. Finch cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Now, Vernon, stay out of this, old man," Holt snapped without taking his eyes off Penelope. "Miss Evans here just needs to understand what's good for her." Penelope felt a flush of anger rise to her cheeks. "I'll thank you to leave me be, Mr. Holt. I have children waiting at the schoolhouse." She attempted to move past him, but his hand shot out, gripping her arm. "Nobody walks away from me, especially not some Eastern girl putting on airs." "Let go of me," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Or what?" His grip tightened painfully. "You got nobody to protect you here, darlin'. Your reputation's already suffering. Folks say you've been leading me on, provoking me with those looks. Might as well make it official and accept my offer." "I've done no such thing." Penelope tried to pull away, her heart pounding. The bell above the door chimed again, and the store fell silent as a tall stranger entered. Dust from the trail covered his denim trousers and dark blue shirt. A well-worn gun belt rested on his hips, speaking of experience rather than show. His face was partially shadowed by his hat, but Penelope could see sharp features and eyes that assessed the situation in seconds. "Problem here." His voice was quiet but carried an unmistakable edge. Holt turned, irritation clear on his face. "Nothing that concerns you, stranger." When a man puts his hands on a lady against her will, it concerns any decent person nearby. The stranger moved further into the store, and Penelope saw his face clearly strong-jawed, with eyes the color of a summer storm and a few days' worth of stubble darkening his chin. He couldn't be much older than 30. "Name's Daniel Yates," he continued, not breaking eye contact with Holt. "Just rode in looking for work. Didn't expect to find a man forgetting his manners first thing." Holt sneered but released Penelope's arm. "You don't know who you're dealing with, Cowboy." "I reckon I do." Daniel's posture remained relaxed, but Penelope noticed his right hand stayed close to his pistol. "I've met your kind in every territory from Texas to Montana." Mr. Finch stepped forward. "Vernon, why don't you head on out? Miss Evans is just trying to get to her school." Holt's jaw tightened, but with a final glare at Penelope, he jammed his hat back on. "This isn't over," he muttered, then pointed at Daniel. "And you'd best watch your back, Cowboy. Willow Creek isn't friendly to troublemakers." After Holt stormed out, Penelope released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Thank you," she said to Daniel, rubbing her arm where Holt's fingers had left red marks. "Though I fear you've made an enemy before you've even unpacked your saddlebags." Daniel shrugged. "Wouldn't be the first time." He studied her face. "Has he been bothering you long, Miss Evans?" "Penelope Evans. I teach at the school." She hesitated, then added, "And yes, for several weeks now it's been difficult." Mr. Finch shook his head sadly. "Vernon's been getting worse since his wife passed. But that's no excuse. Problem is, he's got half the town in his pocket, loans to the businesses, jobs at his ranch. Makes folks reluctant to cross him." Daniel nodded thoughtfully. "I've seen how that goes." He turned back to Penelope. "May I escort you to the schoolhouse, Miss Evans, just to be sure you arrive safely?" Penelope hesitated only briefly. There was something in this stranger's steady gaze that inspired trust, despite the dangerous edge she sensed beneath his calm demeanor. "I'd appreciate that, Mr. Yates." "Thank you." As they walked down the dusty Main Street, children were already gathering outside the white clapboard schoolhouse at the edge of town. Penelope was acutely aware of the tall figure beside her and the curious glances from townsfolk. "You mentioned looking for work," she said, breaking the silence. "What brings you to Willow Creek specifically?" Daniel adjusted his hat against the rising sun. "Been working cattle drives up from Texas. Thought I might settle somewhere for a spell, try my hand at something steadier." His mouth curved in a slight smile. "Though I seem to have a knack for finding trouble wherever I land." "Or perhaps trouble finds you," she replied. Before Daniel could respond, Sheriff Mills approached from the direction of his office, his weathered face set in a frown beneath his gray mustache. "Miss Evans," he nodded, then eyed Daniel suspiciously. "Heard there was some excitement at Finch's store." "Nothing serious, Sheriff," Penelope said quickly. "Mr. Holt was being persistent and Mr. Yates simply intervened." The sheriff's eyes narrowed. "That right?" He turned to Daniel. "Holt claims you threatened him." "Did I now?" Daniel's voice remained even. "Interesting how a man can feel threatened by someone suggesting he shouldn't manhandle a lady." Sheriff Mills sighed. "Look, Yates, I don't know you from Adam, but Vernon Holt's an important man around here. Whatever happened back east that brought you running west, I suggest you don't bring that trouble to my town." "With all due respect, Sheriff," Penelope interjected, "Mr. Holt was the one causing trouble. He grabbed my arm and refused to let go." Mills had the decency to look uncomfortable. "Miss Evans, maybe you should consider." "Well, some folks are saying you've been encouraging his attention, smiling too much, dressing too fine for a simple schoolteacher. Not saying it's true, but perceptions matter in a small town." Penelope felt as if she'd been slapped. "Are you suggesting that they said she provoked him?" Daniel cut in, his voice suddenly hard as steel. "Is that what you're telling me, Sheriff? That this lady deserved to be accosted because of how she dresses or smiles?" Mills backpedaled. "Now, I didn't say that. I'm just telling you how some people see it." Daniel stepped closer to the sheriff, his eyes dangerously calm. "Then I'll tell you how I see it. If Holt lays a hand on Miss Evans again, I'll provoke him into his grave." The sheriff's face reddened. "That sounds mighty like a threat, Mr." "Just a statement of fact." Daniel tipped his hat. "Good day, Sheriff." He turned to Penelope. "Miss Evans, may I call on you later to ensure you get home safely after school?" Still shocked by his words, Penelope nodded mutely. As Daniel walked away, Sheriff Mills shook his head. "That's a dangerous man, Miss Evans. I'd keep my distance if I were you." "Funny," she replied, finding her voice at last. "I was just thinking he might be the only man in this town with any real courage." The day passed slowly for Penelope, her thoughts returning repeatedly to the morning's confrontation and to the stranger who'd stood up for her when no one else would. By the time she dismissed her 20 pupils, ranging from 6 to 15 years of age, the afternoon sun was beginning to lower in the western sky. She was erasing the chalkboard when she heard footsteps on the wooden floor behind her. Turning quickly, chalk still in hand, she relaxed at the sight of Daniel leaning against the doorframe. "Hope I'm not interrupting," he said. "Figured I'd make good on my promise." "Not at all," she replied, setting down the chalk and dusting off her hands. "I was just finishing up." As they walked toward the small house she rented from the widow Turner, Penelope felt an unexpected ease in his company. "What did you do after our encounter with the sheriff?" she asked. "Secured a room at the boarding house, asked around about work." His mouth quirked up at one corner. "Learned quite a bit about Vernon Holt in the process." "Oh," Daniel nodded. "Seems his ranch, the Rocking H, is the lifeblood of this county. He employs half the men, owns notes on most of the businesses. His wife died last year, some say under mysterious circumstances." Penelope frowned. "I arrived after her passing. There were whispers, but nothing concrete. Mrs. Thornton once mentioned that Rachel Holt had bruises she tried to hide." "That fits with what I heard." Daniel's expression darkened. "Also heard he's set his sights on you as the replacement. Been telling folks you two have an understanding." "That's absurd." Penelope stopped walking, her hands clenched at her sides. "I've never given him any encouragement, quite the opposite." "I believe you," Daniel said simply. "But in towns like this, a powerful man's word often becomes the accepted truth, especially when that man holds so many purse strings." They reached her small cottage, nestled among cottonwood trees at the edge of town. It was modest but neat, with curtains in the windows and a small garden along one side. "Thank you for the escort, Mr. Yates," Penelope said, suddenly feeling awkward. "Though I fear your kindness has put a target on your back." Daniel smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his weather-worn face. "Not the first target I've carried, Miss Evans, won't be the last." He glanced at the setting sun. "Lock your doors tonight. I don't trust Holt to let this lie." "Neither do I," she admitted. "Will I see you tomorrow?" "Count on it," he replied, tipping his hat before turning to leave. Penelope watched him walk away, a strange flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with fear. True to his word, Daniel appeared at her cottage the next morning to escort her to school. It quickly became a routine over the following days. He would walk her to the schoolhouse each morning and collect her each afternoon. Between these bookends to her day, he found work helping at the livery stable and took odd jobs around town, slowly earning the respect of some townspeople, despite Vernon Holt's clear displeasure. A week after Daniel's arrival, Penelope sat on her small porch after supper, grading arithmetic papers while the evening breeze provided relief from the day's heat. She looked up at the sound of approaching footsteps, expecting Daniel for their now customary evening conversation. Instead, Vernon Holt stood at her gate, his expression unreadable in the fading light. Penelope set aside her papers and stood. "Mr. Holt, it's inappropriate for you to call at this hour." "Doesn't seem to stop that drifter from visiting," Holt replied, his voice tight with anger. He pushed through the gate uninvited. "We need to talk, Penelope." "Miss Evans to you," she corrected, trying to keep her voice steady. "And I have nothing to say that I haven't already said." Holt climbed the steps to her porch, forcing her to back against the door. "You're making a fool of me, parading around town with that gunslinger. People are talking." "Let them talk," Penelope replied, her hand finding the doorknob behind her. Mr. Yates is a gentleman who understands the meaning of no, a concept you seem to struggle with. Holt's face contorted with rage. You think you're too good for me. I own this town. I could have your job with one word to the school board. Is that a threat, Mr. Holt? It's a promise. He grabbed her shoulders roughly. I've been patient, too patient, but my patience is gone. Take your hands off her. Daniel's voice cut through the evening air like a whip crack. He stood at the gate, his posture deceptively relaxed, but Penelope could see the dangerous glint in his eyes even in the dim light. Holt's fingers dug deeper into her shoulders. This is a private conversation, Cowboy. Keep walking. Daniel moved with surprising speed for such a tall man. In seconds, he was on the porch, his hand closing around Holt's wrist, applying pressure until the rancher released Penelope with a grunt of pain. I warned you what would happen if you touched her again, Daniel said, his voice deadly quiet as he pushed Holt away from Penelope. You threatening me, boy? Holt sneered, though he rubbed his wrist where Daniel had gripped it. No threats, just facts. Daniel positioned himself between Penelope and Holt. You're going to leave Miss Evans alone from now on. No more visits, no more spreading lies about her, no more harassment. Holt laughed, an ugly sound. Or what? You'll kill me. That'd be mighty convenient for you, wouldn't it? Moving in on my territory, thinking you can take what's mine. I'm not anyone's territory, Penelope interjected, her voice stronger than she felt. And I make my own decisions about who I spend time with. Holt ignored her, his eyes locked on Daniel. You think folks don't know who you are, Yates? Or should I say Morgan? Daniel went very still, and Penelope felt a chill despite the warm evening. That's right, Holt continued, smiling now. Got a wire back from a friend in Kansas City. You're Daniel Morgan Yates, wanted for questioning in the death of a man in Dodge City last year. Been using your middle name and keeping your head down ever since. You don't know what you're talking about, Daniel said flatly. Don't I? Holt backed toward the steps. Sheriff's mighty interested in this information. Might be he'll have some questions for you tomorrow. He looked at Penelope. You might want to reconsider who you're allowing to call on you, Miss Evans. A killer isn't much of an improvement over me. After Holt left, silence stretched between them. Penelope finally broke it. Is it true? Daniel sighed heavily, removing his hat and running a hand through his dark hair. Parts of it. My full name is Daniel Morgan Yates. There was trouble in Dodge City. A man died. Did you kill him? Yes. His eyes met hers directly. He was beating a girl half to death outside a saloon. I intervened. He drew on me. I was faster. Penelope studied his face in the fading light. Why didn't you stay and explain? I tried. A shadow passed over his features. The man was the mayor's son. Had a history of hurting women, but his father covered it up each time. When I killed him, witnesses who'd seen the whole thing suddenly couldn't remember what happened. Mayor offered a reward for my capture. I decided moving on was wiser than hanging for doing the right thing. Penelope sat down on the porch swing trying to process this revelation. So you're a wanted man, for questioning, not murder, yet Daniel remained standing, his hat in his hands. I should go. Holt will be talking to the sheriff by now. Where will you go? Further west, maybe. Oregon or California. He looked out toward the darkening horizon. Been running a while now, getting tired of it. Penelope felt an unexpected ache at the thought of his leaving. In just a week, his presence had become something she looked forward to, a bright spot in days previously shadowed by fear of Holt. What if you didn't run? She asked quietly. What if we cleared your name instead? Daniel gave a bitter laugh. How? It's my word against a powerful man's son, and he's dead while I'm alive. There must have been others who saw what happened, people who knew about his behavior. There were, he acknowledged, but none willing to speak against the mayor's family. Then we find them, Make them willing. Penelope stood, surprising herself with her determination. I won't let Holt drive you away just when, she stopped abruptly. Just when what? Daniel asked, stepping closer. She met his gaze. Just when I've found someone who makes me feel safe. Someone I've grown to care about. The confession hung in the air between them. Daniel's expression softened and he reached out slowly to touch her cheek. Penelope, he said quietly, I care for you too, more than I should given the circumstances, but my troubles could bring danger to your door. They already have, she replied, and I'm still standing. Before he could respond, hoofbeats approached rapidly. They both turned to see Sheriff Mills riding up with 2 deputies. Daniel Yates, the sheriff called, dismounting with his gun drawn. Or should I say Daniel Morgan? You're wanted for questioning in a murder. I'm taking you in. Daniel stepped away from Penelope, his hands raised slightly. I'll come peacefully, Sheriff. No need for guns. No, Penelope moved to stand beside him. Sheriff Mills, Mr. Yates was defending a woman being attacked. It was self-defense. That's for a judge to decide, Mills replied. Step aside, Miss Evans. And who will judge Vernon Holt for his actions? She demanded. For threatening me, for grabbing me, for spreading lies, the sheriff had the grace to look uncomfortable. Holt says you've been leading him on, says you provoked his advances. Daniel's voice was deadly quiet. And I told you before, Sheriff, if Holt touches her again, I'll provoke him into his grave. That sounds like another threat, one of the deputies said. It's a promise, Daniel replied, his eyes never leaving the sheriff's. But I'll come with you now without trouble. As the sheriff placed him in handcuffs, Daniel looked at Penelope. Wire Marshal Earp in Dodge City, he said quickly. He wasn't there when it happened, but he knows the truth about the mayor's son. Before she could reply, they led him away, leaving her alone on her porch as night fell. The next morning, instead of going to the schoolhouse, Penelope went straight to the telegraph office and sent a message to Wyatt Earp in Dodge City, explaining the situation and asking for any information that could help Daniel's case. Then she visited Judge Hammond, the circuit judge who happened to be in town hearing cases. I understand your concern, Miss Evans, the elderly judge said after listening to her impassioned plea. But unless there's evidence contradicting the wanted poster, I have to follow the law. All I ask is that you wait for Marshal Earp's reply before sending Mr. Yates back to Kansas, Penelope insisted. If what he says is true, then an innocent man is being persecuted. Judge Hammond studied her over his spectacles. You care for this man. It wasn't a question, but Penelope answered anyway. I do. But that doesn't make what I'm saying any less true. The judge nodded slowly. Very well. I'll give you 48 hours for your telegram to be answered. After that, Yates goes back to Kansas. Penelope left the judge's office with a mixture of hope and dread. 2 days wasn't much time for a message to reach Dodge City and for Earp to respond if he even would. Her next stop was the jail, where Sheriff Mills reluctantly allowed her 5 minutes with Daniel. He looked tired but managed a smile when he saw her. You shouldn't be here, he said through the cell bars. It won't help your reputation. My reputation is already in tatters according to half the town, she replied with a small smile. I sent the wire to Marshal Earp. And Judge Hammond has agreed to wait 48 hours for a response. Daniel's eyes showed a flicker of hope. That's something, at least. He reached through the bars to touch her hand. Penelope, if this doesn't work out, it will, she interrupted. I believe you, Daniel. And I'm not giving up. As she turned to leave, he called after her. Be careful. Holt will see me being locked up as a victory. He might get bolder. Penelope nodded, the same thought having already occurred to her. That evening, as she corrected papers at her desk, a knock came at her door. Her heart leapt with hope that it might be news about Daniel, but when she opened it, Vernon Holt stood there, a satisfied smile on his face. "Evening, Penelope," he said, pushing past her into the house before she could stop him. "Thought we might continue our conversation from yesterday, now that your watchdog is safely behind bars." Penelope left the door open, hoping a neighbor might see Holt's unwelcome presence. "I have nothing to say to you, Mr. Holt. Please leave." Now, he chided, removing his hat and making himself comfortable in her armchair. "That's no way to treat a caller, especially one who holds your future in his hands." "What do you want?" she asked, remaining near the door. "What I've always wanted. You." His eyes traveled over her in a way that made her skin crawl. "Your cowboy's going back to Kansas to swing for murder. Sheriff's already preparing to escort him. Once he's gone, you'll have no protection. No job either once I speak to the school board." Penelope straightened her shoulders. "You're wrong on both counts. Judge Hammond is waiting for a telegram from Marshal Earp that will clear Daniel's name. And as for my job, the school board consists of more than just your puppets." Holt's smile vanished. "Earp won't help. And even if your lover escapes the hangman, he'll never come back here. Men like that don't settle down. They drift until someone faster puts a bullet in them." "You're wrong about him," Penelope said quietly. "Am I?" Holt stood, moving toward her with menace in his eyes. "Or are you just so desperate not to end up alone that you've convinced yourself a killer is your knight in shining armor?" Before she could respond, a new voice entered the conversation. "Step away from her, Holt." They both turned to see Sheriff Mills standing in the doorway, his expression grim. "This is a private conversation, Sheriff," Holt said, his tone dismissive. "Not anymore." Mills stepped inside, followed by Judge Hammond. "Got some interesting telegrams today. One from Marshal Earp confirming Yates's story, and another, even more interesting one from the territorial governor." Holt's face paled slightly. "What are you talking about?" The judge pulled a paper from his coat. "Seems you've been the subject of an investigation for some time, Holt. Cattle rustling, intimidation, fraud, and most recently questions about your wife's death." "That's ridiculous," Holt sputtered. "Who's been spreading these lies?" "No lies," the sheriff replied. "Just evidence that's been building. Your foreman talked after we showed him proof you were planning to frame him for the rustling. Decided to save his own skin." Penelope watched in astonishment as the sheriff placed handcuffs on Holt, who continued to protest his innocence even as they led him away. Judge Hammond lingered. "Miss Evans, I owe you an apology. It seems Mr. Yates was telling the truth, and in bringing attention to his case, you've helped us resolve several others." He handed her a telegram. "This came for you from Dodge City." After the judge left, Penelope opened the telegram with trembling hands. "To Miss P. Evans, stop, confirm Yates acted in defense of woman. Stop, Mayor Jenkins removed from office for corruption. Stop, no charges against Yates. Stop, return to Dodge unnecessary. Stop. Regards, Wyatt Earp." Stop. Relief washed over her as she hurried to the jail, where she found Daniel being released, his few possessions returned to him by a sheepish Sheriff Mills. "Heard what happened with Holt," Daniel said as they walked away from the jail. "Are you all right?" "I am now," she replied, showing him the telegram. "You're a free man, Daniel. No more running." He read the message twice as if not quite believing it. "Earp came through," he murmured. "Never thought he would." "What will you do now?" Penelope asked, her heart suddenly anxious. "Will you still go west?" Daniel looked at her for a long moment, then took her hands in his. "That depends." "On what?" "On whether there's reason for me to stay." His eyes searched hers. "Penelope, I came to Willow Creek looking for a fresh start, not expecting to find anyone worth staying for. Then I walked into that store and saw you, and something changed." "For me too," she admitted, squeezing his hands. "I was so afraid, so alone. Then you stood up for me when no one else would." "I'd do it again," he said softly. "I'd face down 100 men like Holt to keep you safe." "I don't need a protector, Daniel," she replied. "I need a partner, someone who sees me as an equal, who respects my mind as well as my heart." A slow smile spread across his face. "Is that an invitation to court you properly, Miss Evans?" "It is, Mr. Yates," she said, returning his smile. "Though I should warn you, courting a schoolteacher comes with certain expectations of proper behavior." "I'll do my best to meet those expectations," he promised, then added with a glint in his eye, "most of the time." 1 year later, on a perfect June day, Daniel Morgan Yates and Penelope Evans were married in the small church of Willow Creek. The town had changed dramatically in the intervening months. With Vernon Holt in territorial prison awaiting trial for his wife's murder and numerous other crimes, his ranch had been sold to a cooperative of local ranchers. Daniel, with his experience and fair-mindedness, had been asked to manage the operation, giving him a respected position in the community he'd once merely passed through. As they exchanged vows before a church filled with Penelope's students, their parents, and townsfolk who had come to appreciate the couple's steadfast character, Daniel squeezed Penelope's hands gently. "I never expected to find a home," he whispered as the preacher pronounced them husband and wife. "You gave me that, and so much more." "We gave it to each other," she corrected, before he sealed their union with a kiss that promised many more years of partnership, respect, and a love that had been forged in the face of danger but would thrive in the peace they had helped create. As they walked out into the sunshine as husband and wife, Penelope glanced up at the man beside her, no longer a drifter, no longer running from his past. In his eyes, she saw their future. A home filled with love, perhaps children, and the certainty that whatever challenges came their way, they would face them together. And in a town once ruled by fear, they had helped plant the seeds of justice and compassion that would, with careful tending, grow as sturdy as their love.